Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I just say to the member who has resumed his seat that less than 6 months ago, David Clark and I did a tour of his electorate, and I think probably crossed into some other electorates as well. But we started in Timaru and went to Oamaru and we went to Maniatoto and then we went to Queenstown and we went to Dunstan, Balclutha, and we visited all those small hospitals. They hadn't seen the member, and they hadn't seen the member.
Order. That member will sit down, and that member will stand up, withdraw, and apologise.
I withdraw and apologise.
And they hadn't seen the commissioners at that stage. We beat them on the tour of those small rural hospitals. And I can tell that member that we have a very, very good understanding of what is happening in rural New Zealand. And I have to say, what a very erudite speech we got from David Parker, setting out the background of the problem of that amalgamated board of Southern DHB. A decision made by a foolhardy, petty, highly political former Minister of Health, who did not look at the costings or the savings, the service delivery, and the losers, I have to say, the big losers were Invercargill in that amalgamation, and the rural adjuster that should have been put in there. And as David Parker, who set it out very well and understands it, which I see that quite a lot of members opposite don't. In fact, I don't know why the member who resumed his seat didn't speak about how disappointed he was that the rural adjuster for his area has not been changed. And I don't know whether David Parker knows, but they have now done a review of the population-based funding formula. It was delayed because of the Christchurch earthquake, and they only do the review after each census, and so because of the earthquake, no census, so they did not do the population-based funding formula review. It has now been done, and has it changed for Southern District Health Board? No, it has not. It's a very disappointing review indeed, and I think the commissioners who have been put in there to fix the problem are really going to struggle, and one of the good reasons there is not an election for this DHB is the accountability for what they come up with. Straight back to the Minister of Health. Straight back to the Minister of Health, accountability of what they come up with. Now, I just have to say, Mr Speaker, that we have supported this bill. And we supported it because we understand that this District Health Board is in serious trouble and has been from 2009 when a Crown monitor was put in and when they went into intensive monitoring. And I understand that very well, because DHBs that have to have Crown monitors and intensive monitoring are in serious trouble. They could not balance their budget. They were running a deficit, a big deficit, up to about $42 million. And Joe Butterfield, who was the chair, and Joe chaired the South Canterbury DHB right through the years that I was Minister of Health, a good man. He could not balance the budget. He could not, in the end, hold together the attitude and the feelings of the people of the South about what was happening to their health services. We did call for a commissioner much earlier, and maybe if the minister had listened to what we were saying, they would not have had to have delayed this election, because the commissioner would have had the time to work on whatever they were going to put in place to fix this problem in Southern DHB. But he dithered and he dallied around, and finally he put in a commissioner. That commissioner has been there less than a year. Less than a year. It'll be a year in June next month. That is insufficient time for the commissioner, accompanied now by 3 other commissioners, to come up with an implementation plan to be able to fix the problems in Southern DHB. And so reluctantly, we have to give them time to do that. I did put up in the committee stages of this bill, Mr Speaker, a supplementary order paper, and I thank New Zealand First and the Greens for supporting it. It was a sensible supplementary order paper. It suggested that we postpone the election rather than cancel the election till 2019, but we postpone the election of the District Health Board until the plan was implemented, which could be within a year, it could be within 18 months. They could have, by order in council, had an election. It wouldn't have cost any more, because if you are delaying one, you haven't spent the money, and if you have it, you would spend it, and when it gets to the next election, of course you spend for that election. The minister was very charitable and smiled nicely, but did nothing towards looking at it seriously. And I pick up the points made by New Zealand First and the Greens. They opposed the bill at the first reading. We worked hard on it in the Select Committee, and I think perhaps there was some misunderstanding as to what came out of that deliberations, because none of us opposed it at the Select Committee, but they have stayed with what they believed in. We have too tried to amend it, we have tried to make it better, but at the end of the day, we do have to support it, because we cannot leave the people of the southern part of New Zealand with health services that are not working, that the plans that are not in place, and then just put in elected members so the Minister of Health can blame them. Because that's what it got into in the Southern District Health Board, a blame game. And so these commissioners now have got a big lot of work to do. At the Select Committee, we ask for greater transparency by the commissioners. We said they've got to be much more open. Part of the problem for Southerners, they got more and more entrenched in their problems. They closed shop. They didn't want people to see how bad it was. It's what happens when there are big issues. And so we've said you cannot continue in that approach. You've got to be more open. You've got to be more involve the public. They will understand. They will help you. And so we at the Select Committee said there ought to be more openness, transparency and involvement of the public. Within days of us saying that at the Select Committee, and I have to say that it came from the opposition benches, days of saying that the commissioners then announced that there would be more openness and transparency. They now have, and they actually, if they had read the Public Health and Disability Act, they would have known. In fact, even though they were commissioners, they were required to have the statutory committees. They have then decided that they will have the statutory committees and open them up to the public. So I welcome that. But we are going to keep a very close eye on the transparency and openness and involvement of the public as they make their deliberations and they put forward their plan and implement that plan. So we just put on notice that that is what we will be doing, because we do feel that the right of people to have an election for their district health board is a really important one. We also understand that sometimes you have to do things that do not allow you to have an election at that time. But we are suspicious, Mr. Speaker, we are suspicious of this government, which is why we were trying to put in safeguards. And I look at the Minister, Louise Upson, looking at me quizzically. The reason why, Minister, is because a promise was made to the people of Canterbury that they would have an election for Environment Canterbury. A promise made by a minister, written down, said orally, said on the television. And what happened? They postponed the election. They postponed it again. And so trust in the government's word on whether elections would be held is very, very low indeed. And so I can assure the people of the Southern District, when we lead a government come 2017, we will be putting back in place a governance board. We will be ensuring those locals will be back again until they can have an election. And they will certainly be having an election under a Labor-led government. We brought back the democracy into district health boards. It was the National Party that got rid of elected area health boards and replaced them with a whole lot of outfits that had funny names. Cheese, big cheese, wheat cheese, round cheese. They had cheese, they had HFAs, RHAs, you name the acronyms for Africa. But they took away the right of locals to have a say on their health services. And one of the first things we did as a new government, the fifth Labor government, we brought back elected district health boards, 7 members elected, 4 appointed, and that has been in place to this day. The people of Southland deserve that. Southern DHB deserve to have that back, and I can promise you they will get it back.
The question,
Mr Speaker, I commend the bill to the House.
the question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary opinion will say no. The ayes have it.